welcome to Mr. Cooper's very relevant religious studies podcast. Hello and welcome to the Religious Studies podcast. This podcast is a special edition exam podcast taking you through some exam information and some last-minute exam guidance for the forthcoming GCSE. This podcast will talk about what and how to revise, exam technique, and some FAQs. Firstly then, your GCSE will consist of 2 hour-and-a-half exams, sat separately. One will be on morality, the other ultimate questions. The morality paper consists of the following modules: crime and punishment, medical ethics, religious attitudes to the elderly and death, drug abuse, wealth and poverty in British society, and religious attitudes to global poverty. The ultimate questions paper is made up of these units: existence of God, religion and science, revelation, miracles, evil and suffering, and immortality. The exam paper itself will have an 18-mark question on each of these topics, and you will have to answer 4. The advice is to revise 5 topics to provide a contingency in case one question is particularly tricky. In terms of revision of religious teachings and key concepts, there is a large crossover between certain topics which might make revision easier, although you should revise those which suit you. For ultimate questions, existence of God and religion and science crossover, as do revelation and miracles, and evil and suffering is fairly complementary also. Equally, euthanasia, medical ethics, and drug abuse all cross over in terms of the sanctity, quality of life debate. And also British and global poverty are heavily interrelated. Your revision should be threefold. You should ensure that your knowledge of key religious teachings and concepts is thorough. You should confirm your ability to apply these and to justify them in arguments, as well as your own opinion, and you should practice exam technique. In terms of exam technique, the more difficult questions to get full marks on are the 3-mark opinion questions and the 6-mark evaluation questions. The basic point is to read the question. If it says, explain your opinion, then marking is derived from developing your own opinion. If it says talking about more than one point of view, or give reasons for your answer showing how others may disagree, then you need to give a balanced argument. A good idea is to familiarise yourself with the AQA mark scheme to be found on the AQA Religious Studies B page under Key Materials. For the 3-mark question, full marks are gained by a well-developed reason or several simple reasons to support your opinion. To ensure that the ambiguity over what well-developed means is avoided, it is good practice to give one simple and one developed reason. Develop using the term "this means that" or similar. The 6-mark question is a little more complex. To get full marks, your response needs to be well argued and balanced and needs to show good application of your understanding of religion. In other words, it's not sufficient just to give a quote. Additionally, there is also a consideration given to style and coherence. In other words, it has to be written well. You cannot get the 5 and 6 marks if your question is not written well. To write a good answer, there are several pieces of good practice. Firstly, the use of the term "this means that," as I've already mentioned, to provide explanational development is advisable. Also, the use of connectives such as however, in other words, on the other hand, conversely, additionally, also, although, or therefore, provides for good fluidity. When linking your agree and disagree arguments, there are 2 ways of doing this. Either you can present the agree side and then the disagree side, or you can alternate arguments. For example, I agree because, however, some disagree because. The first one gives clarity of thoughts when organising an answer, and the second lends itself to a well-written answer. If using the first method, try to make your last agree argument link with your first disagree argument, which follows it. In other words, Catholics think that, however, the Catholic position could be seen as weak because. Also, you can see that I've mixed an opinion with a religious viewpoint there. Again, this helps with the application of religious understanding, which is crucial for the top marks. All of this sounds very complicated, but rest assured it is articulating what you've been practicing for 2 years. So as long as you plan your answer before writing it, you should be fine. Finally then, it is worth finishing this podcast with some good revision and exam tips for the religious studies exam. When revising, duplicate revision of key concepts and quotes. For example, learn the concepts that can be applied to several topics such as agape, love thy neighbour, the Christian doctrine of ultimate forgiveness, Buddhist loving compassion, or karma as examples. Ensure that your revision covers sufficient religious teachings, but don't overburden yourself with this, as exam practice is just as important. Doing timed practice essays before the exam is a good idea. In terms of the exam, make sure you read all of the questions before answering them, because if you reach the 6 marker and it's a tricky question, but you've already answered all of the other questions of that topic, then your marks might suffer. Make sure you differentiate between the different Christian denominations, naming them specifically if you can, Roman Catholic, Church of England, Methodist, and so on. If you can't name them, then use the word some to avoid committing yourself to something too general. This works the same with all religions. Some Muslims think that, or generally speaking, some Hindus would avoid meat because. Finally, read the news. There's a lot of current information and news surrounding the topics to be considered, which will add topicality to your answer, particularly on the morality paper. Above all, preparation is the biggest weapon. Make sure you've actually thought about the topics you're writing about, rather than just regurgitating information. This depth of understanding will shine through in the exam. Remember, in addition to these podcasts, your teachers will be available for consultation and are happy to help with any queries or to talk about exam practice or subject content. There are also the revision podcasts found here, if you can stomach the deliberately cheesy delivery, and there is the departmental Twitter page at RS Department BSB containing quick exam tips and available for queries if requested. That brings us to the end of the podcast. All that remains is for me to wish you good luck and Godspeed. Thanks for listening to Mr. Cooper's Religious Studies podcast, and remember, do your homework.